I'm Tommy Fountain, Senior Pastor at 1025 Church, Monroe Statham. This is the top 5 at 1025. Number 5, pursue in 22. Thank you for being generous and giving your tithes and offerings. Keep it up. God's blessing us. That's number 5, pursue in 22. Here's number 4. We've got Bible studies that are starting for the ladies and the men. They will both start on simultaneously, I guess I should say, on September the 10th at 2:30. The ladies will meet in the fellowship hall. The men's will meet in the student building here at 1025 Church in Monroe. The ladies will be studying Jennifer Rothschild's book. We'll be studying Tom Rainer's book on the simple church. And here's the good news. Childcare is provided. And if for the ladies you can't come on Sunday, you can come on Monday night at 6:30 p.m. That's 7 sessions of Bible study for men and ladies on that Sunday starting September the 10th. That's number 4. Here's number 3. We need volunteers. Please sign up today. We need you in the nursery area, in the children's area, in the student area. We need you for football. Football season starts this week. So would you please step out into the foyer or in the hallway, sign up to be a volunteer, to be a servant here at 1025 Church. Here's number 2. This Tuesday, 11:30 a.m., senior adult luncheon. Cason Brown, our student pastor, will be sharing the message. Yours truly going to do a little picking and grinning. Don't miss it. Senior adults, that's right, Monroe and Statham, senior adults here, 11:30 a.m. for a great time of a lunch and a worship time. Here's number 1. You've got to remember this. This is number 1. I said number 2. This is number 1. Number 1. Men's Wild Game Supper, August the 26th, Saturday at 5 p.m. Paul Dennis. We're going to have preaching. We're going to have music. You got giveaways, great food. Make sure you sign up on that QR code. And if you can't figure that out, see Brother Brian, see Brother Nick, Pastor Nick, see Pastor JoJo, see Pastor Cason. Don't see me. I can't help you with the QR code, but I can tell you, you need to be here. So that's number 1. Sign up. Now here's the bonus. Next week, we'll be celebrating our 10th year with you here at 1025 Church. Thank you for 10 wonderful years. Looking forward to next Sunday. Now, I am not here today. I'm actually preaching for our good friend, one guy that you love to hear preach, Barry Snap, pastor at Victory Baptist Church in Rockmart. He will be back with us again in the end of January, but he asked me to come and preach for him again, and so I'm preaching up there 2 services today to help him. Now, hey, I love you. God bless you. I have no doubt JoJo, I have no doubt that Nick, and I have no doubt that Cason's going to do a good job for you today, and I look forward to seeing you. You got to always remember, we're always alive at 1025.
Well, good morning, everybody. If you want to go ahead and stand up with us, we're glad that you're here this morning, and join us as we worship and sing together today.
Are you past the point of weary? Is your burden weighing heavy? Is it all too much to carry? Let me tell you about my Jesus. Do you feel that empty feeling? 'Cause shame's done all it's stealing, and you're desperate for some healing. Let me tell you about my Jesus.
He makes a way
Where there ain't no way, rises up from an empty grave. Ain't no sinner that he can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. His love is strong and his grace is free. And the good news is I know that he can do for you what he's done for me. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Let my Jesus change your life. Hallelujah. 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 Amen. Amen. You can wipe away the tears from broken dreams and wasted years, and tell the past to disappear. Oh, let me tell you about my Jesus and all the wrong things that you would go and undo if you could. Who could work it all for your good? Let me tell you about my Jesus. He makes a way where there ain't no way. Rises pays for all my guilty. Who could care that much about me? Let me tell you about my Jesus. Oh, He makes a way where there ain't no way, rises up from an empty grave. Ain't no sinner that He can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. His love is strong and His grace is free. And the good news is I know that He can do for you what He's done for me. Let me tell you about my Jesus. Let my Jesus change your life. Hallelujah. 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 Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. 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 Let my Jesus change your life.
We're going to continue to sing this morning of Christ's love for us. The fact that He so willingly gave Himself over to be killed, that He cares for us. So join us in singing. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And
Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I could hurt you, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
when I was your foe, still your love for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no hope, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me.
Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I could learn you, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's
No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't
pray in this moment. Lord, we thank you for today. We thank you that, Lord, you care for us so much that you would do whatever it costs to care for us and to bring us back to have a relationship with you. That nothing was out of reach, not even the fact of sending your son to die on this earth and to live as a human, to suffer as we do, and then to pay for the sins of all of us, even though he was perfect. So, Lord, as we come today, we just remember again what you've done for us. And I pray that as we sing this next song, that we would truly remember who you are, that you are the God that cares for us, the God who loves us, and we're thankful for all that you've done. It's in your name we pray today. Amen.
If you're troubled, heavy-hearted, just come to Jesus and find your peace. If you're run down, empty-handed, just come to Jesus and find your strength. He is hope for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing your burdens, all that you need in If you're wandering in the darkness, just come to Jesus and find your way. If you want freedom, need forgiveness, just come to Jesus and find His grace. He is hope for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing the burdens, all that you need in Comforter, Counselor, Prince of Peace, Author and Maker of everything, Defender, Deliverer, King of Kings. He is Helper and Healer forevermore, my Savior and shelter through every storm, my refuge, Redeemer, and Lord of Lords. He is Child of heaven and Son of man, Provider, Protector, the great I am, Alpha, Omega, beginning and end. He is hope for the hopeless, rest for the weary, help for the hurting. He is mending the broken, bearing the burdens, all that you need. All that you need.
Amen. Can we give God praise this morning? Amen. Y'all can be seated at this time. Thanks for worshiping with us.
Amen. Let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise this morning. I want to show y'all something before we get in our Bible study. So my kids like to have fun, and they don't always think it through. And so they do things like Sadie takes a picture and puts it on my iPad, not knowing that Daddy would show it to the whole congregation, right? And so I'll show it to you again if it went off there. The title of our message today is Be Sensible. Be sensible, think it through, have sense. Growing up, I was known as someone who had book smarts, but not a whole lot of common sense. And I share that with you because as I think through the different events of my life, I wanted to give you some examples of, just being, or lacking sense. Unfortunately, I had more examples on that side of the tracks than I did on the other side of the tracks. And I was just thinking back through my life, and I said, surely there's plenty of examples, and I couldn't find any. And, I could find a whole lot. And I could really spend the whole time here with you today giving you example after example. But one that just immediately just gets my attention, I think back to high school. When I was in high school, I dated this girl for 4 years in high school. And one day we went out to eat with her parents. And we were sitting there, and her dad, he looked at me, he said, "Jojo, I want to ask you a very serious question." And he said, "Jojo, who is the prettiest girl in your high school?" And I proceeded to answer him, but I was not talking about my girlfriend. I mentioned some other girl's name, and everybody at the table just looking at me as I rambled off about how pretty this girl was, and then it hit me. My girlfriend's sitting right here, and I'm talking about this girl over, and it was awful. Foot in mouth. Anybody ever have that disease? Don't elbow your husband. Hey, it's easy to do that. Now, if you want to know about a foolish thing you've done, here's what I've found. Ask a family member. They will recall things that you don't want to recall. I asked Whitney, and her response was, "There's just too many things to list." I asked Sadie, and Sadie said, "Daddy, here's what you need to tell them about. You need to tell them about how you almost burnt down the house." And that is a great example. Who in here likes to grill? I love to grill out. I love a big, thick steak. And I love steak. I love to grill out anything on the grill, really. But I like to grill out, and so I watch videos about grilling. And I look at different techniques about grilling. And I look at different ways to prepare the meat all the way through the whole process. And having some difficulties back there. Thank you, Adam. And all the way through the process, and I came across these videos where they either sear the steak on the frying pan, on the stovetop, or they'll do this method called reverse searing. You can do all this in the house. And so when you reverse sear a steak, you cook it in the oven for a little bit. You get your grease on the frying pan really hot, and then you take the steak out and you put it on there at the end. It's called a reverse sear. And for whatever reason that day, I said, "No, I'm not going to grill out. I'm going to grill in." And so I started doing that. I put my pan up there, and I put some oil in the pan, and I put my steak in the oven, and everything was going good. And Whitney said, "Hey, why is that smoking like that? Why is it's smoking a lot?" And I said, "Hey, it's part of it. It's what it's supposed to do." And so we opened the windows, and it was smoking, and it was just one of those things where it was, the house was just smoky. And I said, "It's okay. It's part of that. It's the way it's supposed to go." And then next thing you know you know what it did? A flame. And I had thought back because I'd heard my whole life what to do with a grease fire. But I couldn't think of what exactly you were supposed to do with a grease fire. And so I grabbed we have a little thing of sugar over on the counter. And I grabbed the sugar, and I grabbed a handful, and I threw it at the fire, and it just goes like little sparks in the air. And so I knew you don't do anything with water. But at this point, the flames are, they're big. And so I go over to the sink, and I grab the hose, the little handle with the hose on it, and I go, and I just do it once, just like that. And I'm telling you, if you've ever been to the laser show when they do the great balls of fire, I tell you, it hits the flame, and it goes like a mushroom cloud in my kitchen, and it goes up the wall and over here, and I'm like, we're going to die. And so me being the hero that I am, I said, "Whitney, open the door." And so I go over, And I grabbed, and let me back up for a minute. To sear my steak, I went to Walmart and I got the biggest cast iron pan that they sell. Every bit of 50 pounds. I mean, good night. And so I was going to cook for Army when I bought that thing, I guess. But it was that big. And so now I have this sloshing fire, just grease. And I have my oven mitts. And I'm like, I'm going to die, but I'm going to save my family. And so Whitney opens the door. And I go and I run through the kitchen with flaming grease sloshing back and forth in my pan. And I throw it out the back door. And the pan breaks in half. That's how hot it was. Foolishness. Doing something without thinking of the consequences that will come after that. Anybody in here ever been there before? Maybe, yeah. So if you want to reverse your steak, don't do it. Just don't do it. Horrible method. They did not warn me about the risk involved. And needless to say, Kevin, my good friend back here, I took my steaks. I got my steaks out of the pan before I threw it out. And I took them to Kevin's house, and he grilled them for me, and we had steaks that night. On the carport, because our house smelled like charcoal. Foolishness. You know, I can name you all kinds of events in my life that have been like that. And, you know, I even asked my family, I said, all right, so now I need some examples where I demonstrated wisdom. Crickets. I was listening to Pastor Nick's sermon as he preached this message this morning at 9, and he was talking about how excited he was that he got to preach this message. And then he realized what the topic was. And he said, Pastor Tommy only asked me to preach this message because he thinks I'm an expert on the matter. And so, Pastor Nick, if you're watching, I think I'm an expert on the matter. I want you to take your Bible, go to Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. Excuse me. You know, I think back through my life, and there's a lot of examples of foolishness. There's a lot of examples of things that I would like to call wise. Matter of fact, about 5 years ago, I started in my phone. I take my notes on my phone, and as I learn things, I will jot them down. And just a few of them, our pastor says this, Pastor Tommy says this, he got it from Larry Wynn, I believe. He says, walk through a crowd slowly. That's wisdom. Everybody's on a mission in ministry, and on Sunday mornings, we've all got responsibilities that we've got to do. But guess what? There's guests in the building. And we want to make sure that you feel welcome. We want to make sure that you feel at home. We want to make sure that this place is hospitable. Walk through a crowd slowly. Another one that I've learned is this. Our ministry takes place in a setting of the way things are rather than the way things ought to be. And you think about that. We all have these preconceptions of what things ought to be like, what church ought to be like, what our home ought to be like, and I'm not saying all those things are wrong. But we have to come back to reality at some point and realize, especially in ministry, that it's the way things are. Let me illustrate. So it ought to be that the mom and dad in a family dictate where their family goes to church. It ought to be that mom and dad are spiritual enough. Mom and dad have prayed about it enough. Mom and dad are, it's on their mind enough that they want to be in a good church. That's the way it ought to be. But the way it is little Johnny often tells mom and dad where he wants to go to church. And when we realize these things, when we realize that's how our ministry works, we can go a lot further and do a lot more things just by thinking of things realistically. Let me give you another one, and this one's humbling. The moment that you think you're the reason for recent success, stop and remember that God could do far more with far less. That's humbling, isn't it? Look, I've seen my fair share of foolishness in ministry. I've seen my fair share of wisdom, and I could tell you about many different examples. And a matter of fact, as I think about it, is oftentimes I've had many people that have come to me just seeking wise counsel. And I try my best to offer them the best amount of wisdom that I can. And here's what I found. Even if it's good advice, even if it's good, so many times when I counsel with folks, it's almost like, hey, they decide to stop coming, whether I helped them or not. Because now they feel like I know too much about their life, or every illustration or everything I say is about them. And so we have an opportunity to share wisdom, but it's not always received in the best way, or it's received and then after the fact it's something that the devil uses to hinder. But let's look at the text here. Starting in verse 1. Dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for consolation pacifies great offenses. There is an evil I have seen under the sun. As an error proceeding from the ruler, folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in lowly place. I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the grounds like servants. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stone may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength, but wisdom brings success. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. The words of a wise man, of his mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. No man knows what it is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. You see, in this passage, Solomon is going to contrast the life of the fool with the life of the wise man, or the life of the faithful man. And you see, you'll see a lot more about the fool in there. Matter of fact, the word fool or the word folly is mentioned in this text 8 times. So he spends a lot of time talking about, in these 15 verses, talking about the fool. But in there, interwoven in the text, you will see different pictures or different things about the man of wisdom. The first thing I want to point out to you is the illustration in verse 1 that Solomon gives us here when he's talking about the fool, or talking about folly, talking about foolishness. He said, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom. Here's the illustration. Is when a perfumer has their ointment, and it's not necessarily talking about perfume. It's talking about an ointment that would actually be used for medicinal purposes. But when a perfumer sets out that ointment, the goal is for it to be of value. The goal is for it to be of use. Now, when the fly comes along, the fly lands in it and then dies in it. And when the fly dies, the fly begins to create an odor that outrules or overshadows the value that it originally had. Here's what he's saying here, is that the perfumer did not put the fly in there. The perfumer did not mean for that to happen. If the perfumer could have prevented that, he would. But sometimes things happen and they cause a big problem. You see, we have the dead flies in there and we have this great odor. When we lived up in Jefferson, once a year, we lived across from the stadium there in Jefferson, and I don't know why, but once a year we had a fly problem. And so I went on Amazon. I love Amazon because they get my stuff in 2 days, and they get it, and it's always there. Matter of fact, I forget oftentimes what I ordered, so I had to open the box. It's like Christmas all the time. And so I get the box, and I have this fly trap, this bag. It's got some kind of liquid in there that you poke the hole in the top of the bag, and the flies are just attracted to it. It has somewhat of a decent smell. It's not a good smell by any stretch, but the smell attracts the flies to the bag. Well, let me tell you what happens when that bag gets full of flies. It stinks. Something that was good, something that had a purpose, now it stinks. It's not of value. What he's saying here is that the folly, look at the second part of verse 1. So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Here's what I want you to get out of this illustration. If you don't understand it, I want you to get this, is that you can be very wise. You can make very wise and godly decisions. You can do great things in the community. You can be known for being a person of wisdom and making wise decisions. But one bad decision can mess it all up. I often think of ministry, and I think of men who have done a phenomenal job in ministry only to have a moral failure later in life, or to be uncovered later in life. And you see all the good that they did in their life, but that one event overshadows the whole thing. And if we're not careful in our life, our decisions can overshadow that. Let me explain what folly is to some that don't know. Folly is a lack of good sense, a lack of foresight, failing to realize the consequences of a stupid act before it occurs. I'll give you another example of that. I told you about some earlier. Over at the Winder Pizza Hut. It's not a Pizza Hut now, it's like a Mexican restaurant. I was maybe 12 years old. I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. And we got done eating there one night. My grandparents, my aunt, and my cousin are back there. Y'all know this story when I tell it. Went outside. All the kids went outside, and we were out there. And there's a newspaper stand. You don't see those much anymore today, but there's a newspaper stand on the sidewalk. And so I told my sister, I said, Jenna, come over here. I want to do something that's funny. Come on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to act like I slam your head into the newspaper stand. But I'm going to hit it with my hand and make a loud noise, and you just act like you're crying. So what did I do? I took her head and slammed it in the newspaper stand. I forgot to hit it, and she really cried. And I'm telling you, and she got stitches, and for about 2 years, Pizza Hut sent us coupons so that we wouldn't sue them. And so, look, we do things without thinking through, don't we? We do things without thinking of the consequences to our actions. We get in a lot of trouble. The walk of the fool, he starts out going in the wrong direction. Look in verse 2. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left hand. He's not talking about what handed they are, what dominant hand they use. He's talking about the direction in the life in which they go. The wise person goes to the right side. The foolish person goes to the left. He's going in that direction. He says, even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone. Somebody that you can just see they're going the wrong direction in life. As a student pastor for many years, Tommy, you can attest to this. You can begin to see when a student starts going down the wrong path. One of the indicators for me, and I talked about a student with our senior pastor, Tommy, the other day. When I notice it is when a student who has often been pleasant with me and excited to see me is no longer excited to see me. When I walk up, and it used to be he'd come up and give me a hug or a fist bump or something like that, and now I walk up and he walks the other direction. I'm telling you, time after time after time, I see that, and then not too long after that, I hear a story of how he's made some bad decisions in his life. Or he's with the wrong people, or he's doing the wrong things, or he's not doing the right things. The fool is going in the wrong direction. But not only is he going in the wrong direction, he's making the wrong decisions. Look in verse number 8. Solomon gives us these examples, these daily activities. Now keep in mind, these activities are not sinful or wrong in and of themselves. They're simply daily activities. But look in verse 8. He who digs a pit, Solomon says, will fall into it. Now, everybody that digs a pit's not going to fall into it. But a fool, when he doesn't think through, when he's careless in his digging, he will fall into the pit. Whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. Once again, not everybody who breaks through a wall is going to be bitten by a serpent, but if you're not careful, it could happen. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them. He who splits wood may be endangered by it. If the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. What he's saying here is that the fool, because he doesn't take proper care, he doesn't take proper preparation for what he's going to do, he's going to have some consequences that are not positive. Bad things will happen. He'll get bit by a snake. He'll fall in a hole. But not only bad things like that, he'll have to work a whole lot harder. Growing up, my dad loved to keep cheap stuff around the house. I remember, here's the best one of all of them, is we had a push mower, and I had to cut the grass. And our backyard was like this. I mean, it was a slope. It was very steep. And that push mower had 4 tires on it, or 4 wheels, and one of them was just barely clipped onto the lawnmower. And so I'd be pushing that thing across through there, and you know what happened? That back tire would fall off and roll down the hill, and I had to go get it. I had to go back up there. I had to turn the lawnmower off. I'd go down there and get the tire, come back up, put it on the lawnmower, crank the thing back up, start again, and it would happen again. Over and over and over and over, because we didn't take proper care and proper preventative maintenance on our lawnmower. Guess what? It made me work harder. That's what he's talking about here, foolishness. If you've ever chopped wood with a dull axe, you know what he's talking about. It's a great illustration. I remember one time in my life raking leaves with a hoe. You don't rake leaves with a hoe, you rake them with a rake. But you know, you can rake them with a hoe, it's just going to take you twice, if not 4 times as long as doing it the right way. When we don't take the right care, we are acting foolishly. A fool demonstrates his folly in his actions. He's careless, and his carelessness carries consequences. A fool demonstrates his folly in his attitude. His attitude's flippant. They're not serious. They don't care. I remember back in school when they would assign us groups to do group projects. I hated that. I was a good student in school, and I worked hard in school, but I always got in the group with the kid who could care less. And he would not do anything, and so I would carry his load for him, and he'd get a good grade. It made me so mad. But in college, they did that. I don't know why they do group projects in college, but nonetheless, there's always that person that has that flippant or careless attitude. But not only does a fool demonstrate folly in those areas, but a fool demonstrates folly in their associations. Can I tell you this? It's always wise to avoid the appearance of evil. If you think that it looks bad, you think that it is bad, you think that people are going to think you're associated with something that's wrong, hey, be careful. There's wisdom in that. Be careful. And I'm not just talking about people. I'm talking also about places. The people you hang out with, that you can have folly in that. You can have folly in the places that you go. You've heard the phrase, you're guilty by association. We are very much guilty by association when we're with the wrong crowd or when we're going to the wrong places. A fool doesn't think ahead and think about those things. When I think of this passage, I go back to student ministry. Because as teenagers, you're growing up, you're emotionally charged, you're excited about life, you got a lot going on, but you lack the administrative side of your brain to be able to think through the consequences, to be able to think through the steps that you need to go through. Very easily as a teenager, we can be foolish. Not only do I see the walk of the fool, but I see the walk of the faithful. Look back in verse number 2. He says in verse 2, he says this, a wise man's heart is at his right direction. He's going in the right direction. He's not going in the wrong direction like the fool. I can't help but think as I was studying, this is Solomon writing this, but his father David wrote Psalm 1, where he said, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in the law of the Lord he does meditate. He talks about it meditating day and night. The wise man is going in the smart direction, the right direction is what I should say. He makes the right actions, he has the right attitude, and he has the right associations. All those things that Solomon mentions in verses 8 through 11, the wise person or the faithful man is what we have in the outline here. You see that they think these things through. And I'm telling you, if we'll just stop and we'll just be patient and we'll think things through, I'm telling you, the decisions we make and the direction we go will be far better in the end. But he's going in the right direction. He makes the right decisions. He doesn't suffer the consequences of the fool because he's thought it through. He's thoughtful in his decisions. He ponders what the outcome would be. He's also timely. Look in verse number 11. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. You see these guys that charm these snakes and how they can pet them on the head and all that stuff. They're crazy. Why you want to do all that? But there's a right time to pet the snake on the head. You following what he's saying here? You don't just pull it out of the box and hit it on the head. No, that's when you get bit. So a wise person, the faithful man in this text here, makes his decisions in a timely manner. Let me tell you this. The right decision at the wrong time is a bad decision. But not only is he thoughtful in his decisions and he's timely in his decisions, I added this, it's not in the text, but he's tender in his decisions. Let me explain what I mean there. He thinks of how his decisions will affect other people. That's what I've learned in ministry. Your decisions affect other people. Your decisions will either help other people grow closer to Christ, or your decisions will either hurt or hinder people from growing closer to Christ. And we have to be mindful of how our decisions will affect other people. We have to be, as I use the word, tender. We have to think about them when we make decisions. As pastor, as the campus pastor here, and with Brother Tommy as our senior pastor over both campuses, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. But we've got to think them through. We've got to make them at the right time. It amazes me how often, and I used to be like this, and I still can be like this. I run up to Pastor Tommy and I say, hey, we need to do this, and we need to do it now. And it may be a great idea. Usually is. No, I'm joking. We need to do it now. But there's a right time to do it. But also, how will it affect the other people? In the text, you see that there is that you have the walk of the fool and you have the walk of the faithful. But not only do I see the walk of the fool and the walk of the faithful, I see the words of the fool. Look back in verse number 12. The words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. A fool also multiplies words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. The Bible teaches us that the words that come out of our mouth proceed from where? Proceed from our heart. You can tell a lot about a person by just listening to them talk. You with me? You can tell a lot about a person by watching what they type on social media and text message. Any other way that they put their words out there. I'm telling you, I get on social media, and don't be this person. Do not be this person. And I'm not going to comment on your post. Words begin with foolishness. At the end, his talk is raving madness. There's no value in his words for anybody else. He's just talking to hear himself talk. Have you ever heard somebody just to talk, to hear themselves talk? There's no fruit that comes from it. There's no value that comes from it. It's like, just be quiet, stop talking. But he multiplies his words, and he wants to hear himself talk, and the conversations are always about himself. Me, 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 me. They're not beneficial to anybody else. They're only beneficial to self. They're self-destructive. They swallow him up. They're self-direct. It's all about him, but they're also self-deceiving. Look in verse 14. He says this, a fool also multiplies his words. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? And look at verse 15. The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. The word in the end, or the whole thought here, it carries the meaning that he says something so much, he begins to believe. You ever heard the saying, you tell a lie long enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth? A foolish person is known for doing that. We see that oftentimes in our political world, where somebody says something long enough and loud enough that we think it's the truth. And Solomon is saying that's the foolish person. But then at the end, as I was studying, it says this, that phrase, for they do not even know how to go to the city, is just like saying they don't have enough sense to get out of the rain. They don't even know how to go to the city. They do not have enough sense to get out of the rain. A fool, his words are self-deceiving. He thinks they're of value to himself, but he's really just deceiving his own self with all that talk. But then we also have the words of the faithful. We see his words in verse number 12 are gracious. Gracious, they're pleasant, they're kind, they're courteous, they're considerate of others. Look, if you hadn't heard anything else today about the words that come out of your mouth, hear this. It's always best to be gracious with our mouth. If you can't say anything gracious to someone, then don't say anything at all. It does not hurt you to say something. And you're not lying saying something gracious to them. Be kind, be pleasant, be considerate. Think about the day they might have had. Think about what's going on in their life. Be complimentary. There's always something you can find to compliment somebody. I used to hear of how nurses, when a baby would come out and it was an ugly baby, they would look, he's got a pretty nose. Oh, if that's true. Mallory, is that true? Find something to compliment somebody with. Everybody loves to receive a compliment. They're not critical. Aren't we good at being critics? We're great at being critics. Matter of fact, we're the best at everything, so we've got to wait. Adam, let me tell you how to do the sound today, buddy. Jerry, I'm going to tell you how to do the computer because I know better. No, thank you for doing it. Thank you for serving the Lord. Thank you for handling all the things that are going on up there. Be complimentary and not critical. The words of the wise, they build people up rather than tear people down. Let me tell you who does a great job at this. It's our senior pastor, Brother Tommy. I'm telling you, sometimes I just want to gag. He's so nice to people. I'm like, really? Just kind, gracious. I always tell people he's the best cheerleader you'll ever know. Because he finds a way to build you up. And many of you sitting here today, you've had conversations like that with him where he has built you up. Maybe you're having a bad day, or maybe even you came to him like I've done before in a moment of criticism and very negative thinking, and you leave very positive and just, man, I'm glad I went and met with him before I went and talked to that person. That's the kind of people we should be as believers. That's the kind of people that wise people are. They don't destroy others and tear them down. They build them up. They're careful with the words that come out of their mouth because they know the depth in which their words may go. They know the strength in which the words they might have. Look at what Solomon said in Proverbs. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking, but he who refrains his lips is wise. Here's another one, my favorite. Even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace. Sometimes it's best not to say anything at all. Just bite your tongue and walk away. That's the wise thing to do. I learned this a while back from my mentor, one of my mentors, a guy by the name of Wayne Sosby. He said, I always wait 3 days before I respond to some type of negative comment or criticism. Because if I responded then, I'm defensive. If I respond then, I will say things that I shouldn't say. Matter of fact, I'll say things just to try to hurt them as much as they've hurt me. But he said, I wait 3 days, and then I'll respond to them. In those 3 days, I'll think about it. In those 3 days, I'll pray about it. In those 3 days, I may even seek wise counsel about it. But I do not respond. Can I tell you what I've found? I've found that oftentimes I don't even have a need to respond. Because somehow, some way, God takes care of the whole situation. I've had times where that person who came to me very negatively at the beginning comes back a day or two later and apologizes. Says, hey, I was wrong. I was off base. I shouldn't have said it like that. I didn't mean it like that. And there's other times where, hey, don't worry about that. It's already been taken care of. So-and-so did it. Or this is what happened. I'm telling you, God works in the times where we just choose to bite our tongue. Especially if we seek Him for guidance. That is the wise thing to do. Ben, I'm going to ask you to come up for our invitation. And as we get ready for the invitation, I want you to think about your words. Now, I want to ask you this question. Would you say your words are Christ-like? Young people in the room, and not necessarily young people, but older folks in the room as well, our vocabulary that comes out of our mouth is often the stuff that we listen to, the things that go in. What goes in will eventually come out. Is the music we listen to, or the talk shows, the talk radio, whatever it is you listen to, or the TV shows you watch. All these different things that we allow to come in, are they Christ-like? Because they will eventually come out. And if they come out and it's not Christ-like, it's not wise. Words that are Christ-like are gracious. They offer to someone something that they don't deserve. Words that are Christ-like are merciful. They don't give somebody what they do deserve. Words that are Christ-like are patient. Now, as I think of God's many attributes, I'm thankful that He's patient with me. I'm one of the most impatient people you'll ever meet. And I thank God all the time that He's not like me. I'm thankful that He's patient. Are your words patient? I'm also thankful that God is understanding. No matter what you're going through today, God understands what you're going through. When you make a mistake, when you fall in sin, God understands where you're at. Doesn't mean He approves of it. But 1 John 1:9 tells us that if we confess our sin to Him, He's faithful and just to forgive us of our sin and to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. You know what's neat about that verse, Tommy? There's nothing in there, there's not a clause in there that says, except this sin. No. He's faithful and just to forgive us of our sin, of all sin, of any sin. He's understanding. Are your words like that? What about your walk? Is your walk Christ-like? Your life is full of actions and reactions. As you walk through your life, in your circle of influence, whether you're in the school, in the hospital, in the grocery store, at church, on the football field, I go down the list, naming our different circles of influence, all of our actions and reactions, no matter where we're at, are done in the presence of holy God. Every word that comes out of our mouth, every thought that's in our mind is done in the presence of a holy God. But here's what else is true. Those things that we do, those things that we say, they're often done in the presence of other people. And I can tell you time after time where I had an interaction with someone that I didn't handle right. That situation got resolved later down the road, but the people that watched it unfold, they still struggle with it. Someone is always watching you. You are the best Christian that someone knows. You are the most Bible that someone will ever read. And how you act and how you talk will either help them to Christ or it'll push them far away. I want you to stand to your feet. I want you to bow your head and I want you to close your eyes.